the consent agenda. The decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Polk County District Court. So if you believe you have been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the district court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, incorrect, or otherwise constructed improperly, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations for future considerations. All material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation will become a permanent part of the record and will not be returned. So if you have any photos, drawings, maps that you want to share with us, you'll need to leave those with staff for the record or be prepared to provide suitable copies. Just a quick couple of housekeeping items. We ask that you avoid any undue conversation with the audience so as to not be disruptive or distracting from the hearing that is in progress. You're doing a fine job of that so far. Thank you. We also ask that you ensure your cell phone has been silenced. Once again, thank you. And if you need to use a restroom, you can just go right out the main doors here, go past the staircase, don't go down the stairs. There's restrooms on the left just past the staircase. Once the agenda item that you're interested in has been completed, you are welcome to leave the hearing. We'll also have a 10-minute break in the hearing after 3 o'clock if that may be needed. So that's our opening remarks. So to take a look at our consent agenda, I'm going to have Bert Drost come up and talk to us. Bert, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yeah, I do have a few changes to our consent agenda today. Item number 9 is the appeal at 836 Douglas Avenue. I believe that one will have to be discussed since staff has recommended a couple conditions, including paving a driveway and removing some gravel, that the applicant can have their opportunity to protest, I guess. And then we have 3 items we want to move to the consent agenda. That's item number 10, the appeal at 925 Southeast 9th Street. We've received no opposition to that to date, and the applicant's in agreement with the staff recommendation. So as long as nobody is here to oppose it today, staff is comfortable moving number 10 to the consent agenda. Also number 12, which is a proposed sign at 3839 Merle Hay Road. Again, the applicant agrees to the conditions recommended by staff, and we have received no opposition to that. Staff's comfortable moving number 12 to the consent agenda. And then item number 16, which is a garage addition to the rear corner of an existing single-family house. Staff, again, has recommended approval, and the
Consent. So moved. Motion by Marlis. Second. Second by Nathan. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. Aye. All right. So what I'll do now is already we had items 1 through 8 that city staff has again recommended approval by this board, subject to some staff recommendations that the appellant would still have to comply with. So is there anybody opposed to granting approvals for item 1, a special permit at 2200 Beaver Avenue at the First Church of Open Bible? Anybody opposed to item 1? No hands. Item 2, an exception request at 4511 Waveland Court. Any objections? Seeing none. Item 3, a conditional use permit at 1113 East Army Post Road. Any objections there? Seeing none. Item 4, conditional use permit at 4701 Fleur Drive. Any concerns with that? Any hands? None. Item 5, a conditional use permit request near 5801 Hickman Road. Anybody here in opposition to that, near Merle Hay and Hickman Road? Seeing none. Item 6 is a special permit request at 2926 Beaver Avenue. Any opposition to that? Okay, none there. And a variance request for item 7 at 4319 Kingman. Any objections? Okay, and item 8, a conditional use permit in the vicinity of 3825 Vandalia Road, Helena Industries. Anybody opposed to that? Okay, seeing none, would there be a motion by the board to grant approval subject to staff recommendations on items 1 through 8, 12, and 16? Second. All right, moved by Marlis, second by Nathan. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. Aye. Okay, motion carries 6-0. Okay, so what we'll do then, if you were here through items 1 through 8, 12, or 16, those have been approved. Within the week, you'll get a copy of the approval with the decision and order, as well as the conditions for those. So if you're here for items 9, 10, and then 11, 13, 14, 15, and 17. We'll hear those in order here for the rest of our agenda. And congratulations to those who were approved. Have a good afternoon. Okay. Bert, you're going to lead us off then on item 9?
Yes, item number 9 is a request for an exception of 160 square feet over the calculated maximum 820 square feet of accessory structures allowed in the rear yard area. And it would allow construction of a second garage in the backyard of this property. The property is located just north of Euclid Avenue and just to the west of the 6th Avenue Highland Park commercial corridor. The subject property contains a single-family dwelling. They have an existing detached garage at the rear of the property, and then they're proposing the second detached garage closer to the house. It meets all of the setback requirements. It's just a little bigger than what they're allowed. Here is a design of what they're proposing, so it matches the character of the house. And then here's the consent map. The issue is that when the site, the site visit was done last week, it was found that they've gravelled. Unfortunately, that's blurry.
Applicant's request. Okay, seeing none. Do you want to check? Sure.
I don't know if that's them.
Okay. Why don't one of you go ahead and just greet them quick and find out so I don't have to ask directly? We'll go ahead and take a commercial break here and get a few words from our sponsors. I'll have Bert make this real quick, like 15 seconds. Waiting for a sign, looking for the pitch. Eric, can you get thumbs up or no?
It's not bad.
Okay, all right, so for item 9, is there anybody here to speak in opposition to that request? Seeing no hands. All right, any further questions for staff? Seeing no.
Number 10 is a request to subdivide an existing property as well as an adjoining alley right-of-way, or its former alley right-of-way to the north. So this map here shows the entire right-of-way. Just note that they're only able to acquire the south half of that alley right-of-way, even though the map shows the entire alley right-of-way. In order to subdivide it for 3 lots, they would need this area to the north of the house, like where the garage is and where this is. That would be cleared, and then there'd be 2 new houses added in this location there. And then here's the north property line. That vacated alley is in this general vicinity right here. So. And then just another view down the street. And then we did not receive any comment cards back in support or opposition.
Is the attached garage that's mentioned in the drawing, is that like the back half of the first floor?
It would.
Okay.
And again, these aren't to scale. I have to let the applicant explain it, but their intent is to have a garage that would be accessed at the rear of the structure, so it wouldn't be visible from Southeast 9th Street.
Mm-hmm.
So staff has recommended approval of this, subject to a number of conditions. You've seen the same development company a few months ago when they were wanting to do some homes on East Livingston. So this is kind of the same general concept that the board considered then. So we have recommended these conditions. One is that any dwelling constructed shall have a design and building materials that are compatible with the.
Below, right?
Yeah, the ones to the east are.
Okay.
And I
So
believe
there's-
this is a separate parcel to
There's
the
a
north.
provision in the city ordinance that allows for multiple detached duplexes on a single
Right,
lot.
and that property is zoned R3.
R3,
Whereas
okay.
this parcel is zoned to R1.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Okay, applicant or representative of the applicant. So we have a live applicant here. So the applicant gets up to 10 minutes to present their case, and we will need their name and address for the record.
My name's Ross Crump. I live at 1905 6th Avenue in Des Moines.
Michael Donlin and 640 48th Street.
Okay. All right.
We'd like to build 3 houses. There are some multifamily or some duplexes around, so as far as the integrity of the neighborhood, it's already pretty dense in that area, and we're just looking for some exceptions to fit the houses on the lots.
And are you okay with the conditions that the staff has recommended?
Yep, we've already agreed to that.
One, is that correct?
Yes.
I think that maybe I kind of encouraged you before, a separate item. If you're going to be in front of us to be asking for exceptions on distances and setbacks, I'd like to see a drawing. It doesn't have to be a surveyed engineer drawing, but something generally to scale so we can help understand this. Because what you're asking for is, my understanding is some of these houses will be only 3.5 foot from the property line of the next parcel. Is that correct?
Yep, 3.75. Yep.
Right, which is less than the width of 2 push. What's the square footage of each of the houses that you're proposing to build?
Just shy of 1,700 square feet.
Okay, all right. Anybody here to speak in support of the applicant's request?
There are 2 other houses, and then this one. My concerns are traffic and parking. Since they enlarged the Youth Emergency Services Center, parking is a problem now. The employees didn't get enough parking when they granted that change, and so they're parking in the park, but they're also parking up and down our streets. Sewer and infrastructure is a problem. We've had sewage backup in the duplexes right to the north of where we're talking about. So I'm concerned about there being enough there to take care of that problem. All of our duplexes and most of the houses, all except for the big one on this corner, are ranch style. And so they're proposing 2-story, which would stick out like a sore thumb, especially in this particular, somebody mentioned character. They wouldn't match the character. The building materials is a concern. The city council just had a second hearing on changing building materials and size of buildings. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. The slope of the roofs don't meet that requirement, but that's not for me to be concerned about. Basements are not in that neighborhood because this is considered the southeast bottoms. That means the river ran through it for years and years and years and deposited sandy soil. You start digging, you're going to hit water, except in August. The baseball park just north of the Youth Emergency Shelter, they built 10 homes for humanity, did that. I told them when they were first proposing this, don't dig basements, you'll have a problem. They dug them, they filled up with water, the basements. When they went to hook up to the sewer line, they pumped for weeks. Great big massive pumps out there pumping a river down the street because of the water in that soil. That's why it's next to impossible to put a basement in there. I'm just trying to go over some of the things I heard you guys talking about. Another concern is screening and tree removal. There's trees there now. This is a positive for them. I'd like to see those trees removed because they are painful right now, but I'd like to have some kind of screening. The house they're proposing on the north side of this project would be right up against our side door of our duplex. The only thing that's going to save us is that alley is going to be split into 2, and we've agreed to purchase our side of the alley, which might give us a little buffer there. On the other side, we own duplexes on the other side of the big White House, and that's tight there too.
Gary, could you do us a favor? Slide that little drawing over that's laying there. And there's that map, if you could. I think we're trying to visualize here, but if you could kind of point to what you're talking about with
Okay.
what's
I
next to
own
what.
these 3 duplexes here.
Yep,
And this one up over here.
gotcha, okay.
So I'm on both sides of this project,
Right, okay.
and I've always wanted to buy that house, but that's another story.
Okay. All right.
So I'm concerned about population density in that area, not just people, but cars being parked, finding places to park. It's not so much of a problem on Southeast 9th, but on Southeast 10th where the youth emergency shelter is. There's school buses, there's police cars, there's everything in that street blocking traffic all the time. It's hard for us to get in and out of our fourplex, which is right about here.
Have you talked to traffic and engineering about
No,
that?
I've not.
You probably should do that.
I talked to the youth emergency shelter when they first, before they even redeveloped the thing, and they agreed to have their staff not park on Southeast 10th because between their parking and the buses and the police cars, it was a nightmare.
Okay.
They've kept that to a minimum, but now they park up and down Vale, and they will park on Railroad, which is a problem because we only have single drives. Everybody has 2 cars these days. If you approve, that's another concern I would think you would have, is that the driveway needs to accommodate 2 cars per unit. I think a better plan would be just build 1 house there if you're gonna approve something instead of 2. But there's more room for parking and garages and so on and so forth. And basements are a problem too. So those are just my thoughts on the subject, and I'm just concerned about overcrowding in that area.
Okay. Any questions for Gary?
Yeah, a quick question. Just to clarify, you've built 4 duplexes and a fourplex in this area, and your position on this proposed new development is that it adds too much to density. Is that right?
I did not build them. I bought them in a very depressed condition 25 years ago. The person that built them was an attorney who walked the blocks and bought up old houses that were public nuisance houses, replatted the thing and built the duplexes there. He couldn't manage them. When I bought them, there were bullet holes through the walls. There were cars out on the lawns jacked up, and hoods laying on the grass, and broken beer bottles everywhere, and et cetera, et cetera. I've cleaned that whole area up, and they're a pretty nice place to live now. But it's still, I bought them as they are as far as population density goes.
So Gary, are any of your units owner occupied now, or are they all rental? And
They're
you
all rental units.
manage that? Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you for your comments, Gary. Anybody else here to speak in opposition? Okay, seeing none, do we have any further questions for staff? Okay, so Ross, Michael, if you guys want to bring this around, you can have a rebuttal of up to 3 minutes since there was some opposition to your proposal.
As far as parking and density, there will be a 2-car garage behind both units. So we think that'll solve a lot of the parking problem with having 2 vehicles that can go behind and in the garage, so you don't even see the vehicles. We went with the 2-story because there is an old Craftsman, as you can see in these pictures, a big Ford Square. It's 2 stories. And so we felt that to keep that character and that scale, moving to the north was important for us. This neighborhood is a kind of a collage of 2 stories and bungalows, so it's half dime, dozen other to go either 2-story or 1-story there. And then as far as basements, we'll have to determine whether we put basements there or not. We probably won't end up putting basements after those comments, but we'll work with the city on that. So, any questions?
Okay. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public portion then and go to board deliberation.
I think it's a good project and good to have infill development there. I think it's good that they've worked out with the city, kind of all these different recommendations. I guess the only one I'd kind of amend, just for clarity's sake, is making sure that it's clear that we're not requiring, if we were to pass this, that we're not requiring that they build a full basement under the garage. So,
Yeah.
number 6, I guess I'm going to move, and we could still continue discussing, but I'm going to move staff recommendation and add in, I can't remember what Bert said, provision of a full basement under each dwelling exclusive of under the garage or something like that.
Now, a garage with a basement would be really cool.
Yeah,
but,
it'd be great.
but yes, but we don't want to make that assumption. Any other thoughts?
But you're allowing that if it's not feasible because of water table, they don't have to have it?
Yeah, that's what they've got in the rest of 6.
Okay, great.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, just one. Like having side yards, but it's going to pass. Motion carries 5-1 to grant the requested exception, subject to staff recommendation and the changes thereon on item 6. And you removed what? Didn't you remove one? Let's see. And the
No, I
211.
just added.
you added that. Okay. Okay. All right. So that takes care of item 10. All right. That'll bring us now to item 11, a variance and exception request at 2016 Martin Luther King Parkway.
Item 11 is a property that's located on ML King Jr. Parkway, just south of Lincoln Avenue, up on the city's near north side there. And it has direct access onto ML King. So if you look at the property as the photo shows, and I'll probably be referencing back to this on the regards to the driveway, based on some of the recommendations. This is the property here, 2016. They've provided a 3-car garage back here in the rear yard. I think this is some kind of a section line or something, so don't get that confused with the property line. The property lines show up better, I think, on that original map.
So they already built this garage?
Yeah, so they got a permit, and when the inspection came along, it was determined that the garage was taller than what the permit was for, 11 inches over. And then also it was constructed in a way which created second story. So that the other thing that was revealed in the review was then they had taken recently added what would be considered a circle driveway. So they put a new driveway here, and if you look at the photo, they did not provide the approach clear to the edge of the curb. So here's the sidewalk, and they flared out. So what's happening is vehicles are hopping the curb there, so they wouldn't, even if the board grants it, this, they did not appeal the amount of paving in the front yard area. They essentially have a driveway that circles around back behind the house at this point. So one of the things we're going to ask is that they meet the requirements for front yard percentage, and then also restore the area between the sidewalk and the curb, which is already very narrow. So when we looked at this, I think that the 11 inches is a sort of a nominal situation with the construction. From the intent of the ordinance, I think that they're meeting the intent. I guess the board would have to look at the variance criteria and determine if the garage had to be modified. Would that be within the variance criteria? Staff's recommending that it be left as it's been constructed. We do want to make sure that there isn't any use of it as an accessory dwelling unit at this point until such time as maybe the ordinance would allow that in the future, or they would come back with other relief. Same with regard to a home business or commercial business for the property. We would want them to then remove 48.7 square feet of pavement from the front yard area and restore that to a turf condition. I guess I would allow them to have the option of where they wanted to make that work for them. I think they could probably narrow both driveways to 8 feet and possibly keep it as a kind of a horseshoe circulation. That would be something they need to look at or come back with a separate request or appeal. And then if they do remove an approach, we would want them to restore this area within the right-of-way back to a turf condition. I guess the other thing is if both approaches remain, they're going to need to get a proper approach permit that would be inspected with the proper thickness and the proper construction at the curb where they drop the curb and the street. So that would be something that we will have to work on them with them individually one way or the other, whether it gets removed completely or whether it's granted and they have to do it in the proper manner. So generally the 6 conditions are what's recommended at this point. We are recommending in favor. We believe that they can provide materials and exterior materials that will be compatible with their building. They haven't really showed the full material going on there. They're showing some vinyl siding. We just want to make sure it's of a lap style that would be compatible with the house. I don't think that's going to be a challenge for them to comply with that condition. So, are there any questions? I'll show you the consent.
Sure. Questions for Eric while he shows us that? Eric, to the best of your knowledge from the inspectors looking at the garage and determining it's slightly too tall, is there any evidence of any plumbing or anything, like there any water service to the garage?
I did, that wasn't determined that there wasn't anything applied for to that regard. Okay. So that would have been something that would have been caught during the inspection. So. Okay.
All right. But the idea is what you're saying is there's kind of like a second level that's tall enough it could potentially be
it meets the definition of the way the code.
But to the best of your knowledge, the applicant didn't say they intended to use it for any kind of recreational space
we didn't have
or
any
use space besides storage.
There wasn't any, they didn't reveal any intention, and it's not finished out or anything at this point.
No stairs up to it or anything?
You'd have to ask the applicant.
Okay,
I don't think there's.
I'll check and see.
I think there's probably some type of stair, but.
And you aren't opposed to, again, having 2 driveway entrances as long as they restore some turf to meet what the minimum requirements for front yard open space? Is that where the 48
Right, and I know
from?
it's a challenge circulation with the traffic approach that was issued, so.
But the south side one, did that not exist before?
I don't even think it's actually at it. It's not really an approach. It's kind of a.
But it's being used.
Yeah.
More than likely.
It's starting to be used. It's not, this has been, if you look at aerial of recent years, this was kind of I would say dirt.
Sure,
driveway.
but it was being used for circulation.
So it was being used.
Build your garage correctly. If you've ever got questions before you begin construction or remodeling, it's always best to check with the permit and development staff. And they're there to help you to see if you do need a permit or how wide, how tall, or how many square foot something can be. Okay? To see that minimal amount of paving be removed. You can keep your driveway going all the way around, but you're going to have to make that approach a little nicer out to the street. Work with city staff on that. And you may have to take away just a little concrete off of the one side of the driveway and put some grass back. But you got most of what you wanted today. The staff will send this to you in writing in about 1 week. And then if you have any questions, you can come down and finish out any other permits or permission. But once you have that in writing, then they can help you work through that. Okay? All right, thanks for coming down today. Okay, all right, that'll then bring us to, I believe, item 13. Item 13 is a variance and exception request at 1013 Scott Avenue. And Eric's going to kick us off on this one.
One thing right off the bat I want to point out is that the subject property does not include the portion of the alley that was vacated south of the blue line, the zoning boundary there. So it does include the entire width of the alley west of and adjacent to this home in the aerial.
So does that just show up because as a legal description, that parcel does include that little hook,
No,
or what?
it's just a
Doing this.
correction from what we
Okay.
put together on the mapping, so.
All right.
The entire alley was recently vacated at the request of the owner, but only the portion adjoining their parcel to the west was sold to them.
Okay. All right.
And this is, I'll give you a quick here with the photos of the site so you have an understanding of what's going on. So this is a fairly recently built home, built by Habitat for Humanity. As part of that, they generally don't build garages on their properties, but they're still required to provide the one parking space outside of the front yard. So they paved a driveway to the east of the house, which exists. The applicant or the appellant wants to retain the use of that. And then subsequently, they went through the process of getting the alley vacated. The city council recommended selling her the adjoining, entire width of the adjoining alley here as you see it, which is a 20-foot wide section of alley. They're seeking to have the entire width of that then as a driveway that would go back to the garage that they're constructing on the property. They've got a permit for it, which again, even before they owned the alley, they were able to get a permit to build in their rear yard with access off an existing alley. So they're building a garage back in this area. In addition, they're also wanting to extend their front porch into the front yard. If you look at this, it really isn't projecting very far in front of this home to the west. And then there's another structure to the east of them even that also projects that close. There's a fairly wide right-of-way width between curb and property line here. So from that standpoint, it's not really in the view shed of the street. If you're familiar, this is the WPA constructed fountain at the city park over
Oh,
here.
yeah, sure. Exactly where that is.
So that gives you a point of reference. Staff looked at this. The paving allowance to keep the east driveway as a second kind of pad for parking or whatever does cause a variance condition. I don't think we were able to determine that they demonstrated that there was an unnecessary hardship to be able to say we could approve that. There's certainly characteristics of the site that are unusual in terms of the proximity of the house to the street, the average setbacks of existing structures, to just practical difficulty for an exception. So we're in support of anything that could be a
Driveway on the north side, I see a 9.5 on kind of the hand-drawn black marker stuff there. Is that your understanding about the current
Yeah, I
width?
think they built it, that's what they put in their submittal, so
Okay.
I don't know if anyone ever put a tape to it from our
Right,
perspective.
but generally speaking, it's about 9.5. And
Yeah.
are you saying that if they would do up to an 8-foot driveway on the south, what I want to call the alley driveway, that at the exception level, then that probably could be no more wider than 8 feet?
Without actually knowing whether you're granting the porch or not,
Right.
that actual paving, I didn't want to put out an actual paving amount.
Okay, all right. But
I
it wouldn't be
think
any
I
narrower.
think they can accomplish it and not have to get relief of the
Okay,
driveway being too narrow.
Okay.
I think they can do it with 8 feet
All right.
and make it work for to achieve the 25%.
and the city does have a minimum driveway width as well, is that correct?
For single family, they do have to be 8 foot. If they go narrower than that, then they would need relief to
Okay.
go less than 8 foot, so.
And
All
you're
right.
saying it's dependent on the front porch because that's where the front yard.
That's right,
You're losing square footage from that to
Right.
bump out the porch, yeah.
right.
Okay.
But it would, probably in this case, would more affect how the approach is done.
Right.
In the public right away.
Than
Wouldn't be
anything.
nearly as expansive with only, with a narrower driveway.
Okay.
It's not so much there won't be a lot of the front yard that will really be affected by.
Their proposal, though, is for 20 feet
They're showing, they want the entire width of the,
paved.
Former alley.
yeah.
Okay.
And Eric, to the best of your knowledge, and you may not know this, when the city was looking at vacating the right-of-way or they looked at purchasing it, however that worked, would the city have had an understanding at that time of what their intention would have been for use of that?
I think they expressed they wanted it to get access back to their garage.
Okay, all right.
But again, they granted the full width, typical would have been half the width. When residential situations, the policy generally says
'Cause you want to give the other owner
half
an
the
opportunity.
width, right, but
Yeah.
the council decided to give the full width, so.
And again, to the best of your knowledge, was that based on an understanding of maybe what they wanted to do with it once they got a hold of it?
Well, the vacation in itself, I think it was understood that it was for access back to their rear yard, yeah.
All right. Okay.
We didn't really get into the overall width of what they
Yeah,
were
I'm
gonna
sure.
propose,
Again,
yeah.
just curious if you knew some of that. Okay. All right, anything else for Eric? All right, thank you, sir. Okay, applicant, it's your turn. Welcome. Come on up. And again, we just need your name and address, and you have up to 10 minutes to present your reason for your appeal.
Okay, my name is Dikran Mehdawi. I live in 1013 Scott Avenue.
Okay?
Okay, so I actually request for two different things. The first one, actually both of them is most important for my family, not just for me.
Okay.
I work for my family. Well, the first things I would like have a permit from 20 foot. The other side, that's additional driveway. And that's the only way I can do access to build other garage in my backyard. I would like have a 20-foot permit. The other things I requested for a new porch. I would like build a new porch because I already have porch, but I will close that porch and make it part of my house. That's all I need.
Okay. So on your porch, if you want to enclose the existing porch
Yes.
and then have this other bump out,
Yes, right.
and will that additional bump out this be also covered?
Yes, sure.
Okay, it'll be open on the sides but covered on the top.
Yes, right.
Okay. All right, I got you. Okay. And just real quick, Eric, that's your understanding that she'd want to enclose the existing porch and then do that
Yes.
bump out? You're okay
Yeah.
with that? Okay. All right. On the paving, we have some city streets that aren't even 20 foot wide. You know, that's like 2 lanes of traffic, 10 foot and 10 foot. That's a pretty wide driveway you're asking for at 20 feet. Why would that need to be that wide to get back to your garage?
Yes, sir. Actually, the first one is not 10 feet, like about the first driveway they do by Habitat for Humanity. My
Yes, your
house
existing
from, yeah,
driveway,
this is
right.
9 something. But the other one, since the first time I asked my city council to have me this wide and hold the alley that wide to kind of help me to get access to put a garage in my backyard. And you know how many cars I have in my house, like over 6 vehicles. That's the only way can hold me to when stop, probably my husband on the way, my son got it, other way to get access to the garage. I cannot, tell them, hey, you have to pick out your cars to have it the other cars. You know what I
My
mean?
wife makes me do
So-
that every day.
That's so hard because actually I have
Okay.
3 kids and they're all of us has different job, different time, one sleep, the other one wake up, stuff like that. So I would like help us, my family, to get 20 foot. That's really good enough for us.
Do you have any trees or landscaping in your front yard right now?
No.
Okay. If we were willing to make a deal to allow you to have the wider driveway, could you put a couple nice ornamental trees in your front yard?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right. You can go ahead and sit down for a few minutes. We'll check back with you. Thank you. Anybody here to speak in support of the applicant? Okay. Seeing none. Anybody here to speak in opposition? Okay. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Jessica Dobbin. I live at 618 Southeast 10th. And I don't know, I'm kind of over off of 10th and Scott, in between Scott and Shaw.
So do you border the property directly, or are you around the corner a little bit?
I am, where would I be here? They're 10th. I am right here in the
Oh,
red.
okay.
right.
I got you.
Sorry,
Okay.
I moved it. My concerns, after listening, I have some better concerns and some I'm still a little worried about. Would they be taking up the whole alley from Scott to Shaw? My only concerns is we have a lot of family members with little kids back here.
It stops right here at that line.
Okay, so then I really don't have that much of a concern. I was more worried about the little kids running back and forth and cars being able to go up and down that alley. So I guess I really don't have much of a concern now.
Yeah, yeah. And it would be considered their property. It's no longer an alley then.
Oh, it isn't, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was more worried about children running up and down. We have a lot of little families that's 3 to 5 and a couple of newborns, and they're all running around in there, and I was more concerned of maybe cars going through, not seeing the little ones, and for that to be a whole alley that cars can go through,
I
I was a
gotcha.
little concerned on that part.
Okay.
So I'm really not opposed to any of the other.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else here to speak in opposition? Okay. Seeing none, do we have any further questions for staff? I can call that opposition. Oh, no. Did somebody have a question?
I had a quick question.
Yeah, Sure. Nathan.
So where does the front yard end? Like, where could they
Flare out then?
flare out to 20 feet by
So if
right?
you gave the relief for the addition to the front, the average is the same for the requirement, and that relief would be granted, but where we calculate the front yard of the dwelling is the front of that, so.
So,
That total area that we
Relief.
calculate the percentage from goes down. So it's relative though, because if it was a bigger yard, they could have more paving because the
Yeah,
25% applies to a bigger area.
but you could have an 8-foot approach and it could flare out 7.5 feet in.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So
I'm with you.
coming in, it could be narrow, and then once it gets past this front, it could flare down so they can get in, and then it widen out next to the house.
And have room to go by each other.
Yeah,
Right, yeah,
so you
yeah.
could park.
So we wouldn't be parked double wide in the front yard then, per se.
I don't even know if there's enough depth to park in the front yard area of that driveway without going over the sidewalk or into the drive approach, because there won't be enough setback for a full depth stall. Now, part of a car might be into that and still be on the property, but
Okay? Got it? All right.
so I think they can taper it fairly quickly, and because of the shallowness of that front setback.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good question, Nathan. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation. So,
What I mean, I'll talk since I already started. I think staff did a good job of trying to work with her. I understand the situation, but I don't think she's met the variance test. So if we could figure out a way to do this exception, I think really if they're able to flare out 7.5 feet into the driveway to 20 feet, they'll be able to park and get by each other. It just will be that front approach that they'll be pulling in and out of. So that would, I think I like staff recommendation, but I'm not going to make a motion yet.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts? Okay. Would you guys want to see one tree maybe put in the front yard to go along with that? Or do you care? If we're going to give away a lot of paving, I'd want to see maybe some landscaping
I'd like to
improvement.
see one true tree.
Regardless?
I think we need a tree.
Okay. And we have done that before when we've had double approaches on front yards when we don't have any landscaping. Any other thoughts? All right, you want to try a motion? Make you earn your position here.
Sure. I really don't care one way or the other on the trade. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, though.
Don't worry about it.
I'd move staff recommendation of denying the variance but approving an exception request for the paving as written here, subject to issuance of necessary drive approach permit.
Okay.
And then also approve the exception for the porch addition with the conditions listed in the staff recommendation.
Okay. All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we're going to try to make this work. It might be skinnier off the curb, but then it can flare out.
Property that's zoned R160, but it has an existing 4-unit multifamily residential development on it. And so since it's zoned single family, the multifamily use is considered non-conforming. And they're wanting to expand it by adding a second accessory structure in the rear yard area. So the subject property is located in the Woodland Heights Organization neighborhood, just to the north of Ingersoll Avenue. It's kind of behind the Vogue Vision clinic. Here's a sketch that they provided. You can see the driveway off 24th.
I built it, the floor plan was 120 square feet inside, but then when I find out that it goes by the footprint, it was like 10 feet over. So I can cut it down to size.
And groundhogs just love buildings on skids because they just love those voids underneath. So just a warning to you. You might have some if you don't already.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else here to speak in support of the applicant? Oh, I think we kind of went through that. Okay. So we'll close public portion, then go to board deliberation.
Well, he doesn't meet the variance, but if he would be willing to pave his property, then I might give it some consideration. But then, of course, he'd have to change the structure to meet requirements, not on skids, i.e. not on skids.
Yeah, and in my opinion, at a minimum, if he wanted to keep it, it needs to be on a foundation, so it's a real structure. I'm not opposed to what you're talking about on the other, but let's see what others think.
So you're saying you'd want him to put it on a slab?
If he'd want to keep the building, then let's call it what it should be. It should be a structure then. It should be a permanent building.
Would that be permitted?
If he meets the city's requirements for footings, yeah. If you're inclined to want to grant this is at the variance level.
Yeah, I get it. I guess I think it's unnecessary to force him to pave his driveway. If all he wants to do is keep that building and we let him put it on a pad that's acceptable based on the zoning requirement, let's not put a bunch of undue pressure on the guy. I don't see this as for me personally, let's trade something out here for something.
Right. Yeah.
Just my thoughts.
Okay. Anybody else? Or any motion?
I'm going to
Try it.
staff.
Okay.
A second.
All right.
Staff call for permanent foundation.
Staff is denying the
Okay.
building, period.
Okay.
Yeah, staff is denying the building. That's the staff recommendation. Just, nope. If it's temporary, then it can no longer be temporary. It's just got to go.
Okay.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second to deny the requested variance to allow that expansion. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? It's 2. Okay. So that motion carries. So unfortunately, Kirk, in this case, you're going to have to find somebody who wants to buy your nice little building. So if you want to look at rezoning someday to get back to R160, you could maybe look at that someday. So, or the subject property is in the R160. If you want to convert back to that, they'd probably like that someday. Okay, that'll move us then to item 15, a variance request at 5150 East 14th Street.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this property is a Casey's. I think it was built as a shortstop Phillips 66, but then was acquired by Casey's subsequent to the annexation of this into the city. And the construction occurred right around the time of the annexation. It's the furthest north point of the city, just if you're into trivia. So everything to the west and north and east is in the unincorporated areas of the county, in this case. They are up against a Iowa DOT project of the adjoining Highway 69, where they're being asked by the state to move an existing sign out of the right-of-way. If you're looking from the north side of the site, this is the sign that's located at the southeast corner of the site. It may not be very visible from the aerial with the hatching over it, but it's down in this location. The state is asking them to relocate it out of that. They're proposing to place it more at the north edge of their site, north of their north driveway. So again, when you're looking at the property, they're looking to place it in this location. So they're essentially just asking to relocate this same sign. And you can see the footing there a little more clear, how it's attached to the ground. There's multiple elements to it. The way it's calculated is actually a rectangle of this entire face there, even though there's actually gaps between panels and stuff. The electronic component is calculated within this area. They're facing the same situation as the Montana Mikes a little bit to the south of them that came to the board. Now Montana Mikes came with another alternative where they were taking their existing sign and fixing it to a monument base. So they were also asking if they couldn't get their sign to be a pole sign. They wanted to have a wider dimension, a smaller base, over the height for a monument sign that close to the right of way. So it's a little different than that request in that there isn't really an alternative proposed. Certainly Casey's has done monument signs in other locations of the city, outside the city. One example would be the Casey's located at Indianola Avenue and East Army Post Road has a monument sign at that location. So it's not that Casey's doesn't do monument signs, they do. I think this is just a matter of being able to simply move the sign on the site without a lot of expense. Although because it's taking a variance to do that, staff can't support the variance because we don't believe they're meeting that test for unnecessary hardship. So we're recommending denial of it. In this instance, I think there might be some different elements to their situation versus other locations of their stores, in that it is in close proximity to the highway. So you're probably going to hear that they need more exposure with a little bit taller sign. They can certainly go up to 15 feet with a monument sign. They would have to pull it back a little ways. So if you're looking at their sign here to the north of the driveway, they could keep, as long as they were keeping it back 25 feet, they could go up to 15 feet in total height and get very close to what they were already providing. They may be able to remove some of the foliage or relocate some of the foliage to make that more visible. So I think there's alternatives available to them to meet the intent of the city's ordinance. This represents the response cards that I passed around. We did that. There was the one in opposition to the west. Any questions?
Anything for Eric? Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Applicant or representative of the applicant. Thank you for your patience in waiting this afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know it's a thankless job.
You just thanked us.
So thank you.
It's all worth it.
Do that before I get the decision, of course. My name is Jim Scalota, 1 Southeast Convenience Boulevard, Ankeny, Iowa, representing Casey's. The reason why I'm here, I don't necessarily disagree with anything you said, but what I'd like to stress is that Casey's is caught in the middle here. We don't want to move the sign. We'd love to keep it right where it is. State's coming through. They're expanding the road. It's not that they're asking Casey's to move the sign. They're telling us, sign's got to go. All we want to do is take the sign and move it someplace else. And we didn't ask for the ordinance to be passed. The sign was put up before the ordinance was there. We didn't ask for the state to come through and change the road. They're not improving our access in any way. And at the end of the day, if we can't get a variance, we're going to end up with a worse sign, which is going to put us at a competitive disadvantage. That's pretty much my argument. It's just unfair to Casey's that we're caught in the middle between two different things, neither of which was of our own doing.
Questions for Jim? Jim, would you generally know about what the age of that current sign is?
So I couldn't find an exact record, but
So go back to your the predecessor had put it in? Or?
So I think that we put up the whole thing. I don't. We may have kept their pole and changed the signage.
Okay.
I'm told from our sign person that he thinks it was in 2012.
Okay.
But we couldn't confirm it.
Okay, all right. And has DOT offered you some form of compensation for, sorry, we're gonna take your property out? Are they providing you any remuneration for that?
So the status right now is a little weird, right? So they've given us some an offer for the property, which isn't very much taking. It's actually a fairly small portion of the property. And then they said, well, and for your personal property, which for some reason they consider the sign that's affixed to the ground to be personal property, you can talk to us later about that. And so far I said, I'm not agreeing to anything until we figure out what we're going to do with the sign, because if we're going to lose the sign, you're going to have to pay us for the sign. And they said, well, why don't you go and ask for a variance, and then we'll see. It's not, obviously, if we lose the sign, we're going to fight with them over compensation. But our issue isn't so much the cost as much as, it's a nice sign. It lets people know what the price of gas is. People like to see the price of gas. Monument signs, we do put them in, but given a choice between a pole sign and a monument sign, any gas station anywhere in the world is going to put up a pole sign because your customers can see it better, and it is an advantage to have that kind of sign.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Jim? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you again.
All right. Anybody here to speak in support of the applicant? Seeing none, anybody here to speak in opposition to the applicant? Okay. Pretty clear here. Yeah, you're here in opposition?
Well, I'm here for staff.
Okay.
Chair, members of the board, Stan Donovan, zoning enforcement officer for the city of Des Moines. I understand Casey's is caught, but a lot of people have been caught by our sign ordinance, and if the sign is removed for any reason, the ordinance says it has to be a monument sign. So we have been consistent across the board with adhering to this ordinance, and the reason for the ordinance is to decrease clutter. We made a neighbor up here do the same thing for the same reason. I believe consistency is a good thing, and we should have them put up a monument sign. Unfortunately, they got caught, and everybody else does by this ordinance also. So I believe they don't meet the test for the variance, and they should put up a monument sign.
Okay. All right. So, since we had opposition, Jim, you can say anything else you want in closing to counter what you just heard, if you want another minute or two.
To the extent it helps, I'd just like to point out that this is kind of surrounded by area that's outside of the city of Des Moines, so you're not really cluttering up the city. You know, we're kind of like, we're at the very edge. If we were on another property, we wouldn't be covered by the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, we'll close public portion, go to board deliberation.
I live near this area and I go by it all the time, and pretty soon it's going to be part of the city. I mean, I thought when I moved to the area 30 years ago that 2nd Avenue and these areas were going to be like sacred and never have a move. But since Montana Mike's is going down, and I've been paying more attention to signs since I've been on the board. I never knew we paid so much attention to them before I came here. And it is making a difference. And I do like the fact that they are becoming more uniform and on the ground level rather than looking up in the air here, there, and everywhere. So I am going to be voting with staff recommendations. I don't know what anyone else is going to make a motion on, but that's the way I'll be going because I think that they have worked hard to set up a direction, and I don't see any need to not follow it in this case.
I give Jim all the credit in the world for being nice and kind and good intro and thanking us. And yes, there's a cost to these things. There's also a cost of doing business in general. I've seen some folks that just decide we're rebranding, and they do new signs and they do new sign faces. They change logos or colors and they put up new signs. But yes, we have been consistent in the past. Get and Go wanted to retain a damaged sign on Merle Hay Road, but we're trying to take our major corridors, and not just the major corridors, but citywide, and reduce that signage clutter and still give people what they need to understand where they're going. I know that there are convenience stores in West Des Moines on Jordan Creek Parkway. There are convenience stores in Waukee and in Ankeny that have to do monument signs. It may not be this board's doing, but if there's a change to the property, whether it's a damaged sign, eminent domain, buying right of way, or even an owner just wanting to expand a business, we have plenty of room on this property to look at incorporating a monument sign. Landscaping could certainly be trimmed or modified. And I think Casey's has such a great reputation. If I'm pulling off on that exit, I'm going there. So I would agree with Lynn in this case. I'd recommend denial of that requested appeal if you did not already. Did you?
Well, okay, I will move that we deny the requested appeal.
Okay. We got a pretty strong variance test here, and it can't just be an economic hardship. We've got to meet the spirit of the zoning ordinance and the intent of the character in the area. All right, I'm seconding that. So we got a motion and a second to deny the requested appeals. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. I do need to buy some gas tonight, though, so I know where I'm stopping. Okay, item 16. Oh, wait, nope, we had that on consent. So item 17, correct? That's a variance request at 4913 38th Place. Oh, thank you. Oh, this was the last one. That's for Casey.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the property at 4913 38th Place in the Lower Beaver neighborhood area, right at the southeast corner of Brinkwood and 38th Place. The house faces 38th, so I believe that's why it's addressed off of 38th. However, what we consider as the front yard area is on the Brinkwood side because the narrow dimension of the lot is oriented toward Brinkwood. On a corner lot, of course, we have 2 front yards, but so in that sense, it really isn't too relevant in this situation. The appellant is requesting to provide a privacy type fence into the front yard area along Brinkwood. So if you see the boundary here, they would project north of the existing side of the house. This is the front of the neighbor's house, so the front yard is based on an averaging of what goes on to the east. By going that high, you have to stay at a 3 foot or below with a solid fence, or 4 foot with an open fence. This triggers a variance because it would be what's being proposed is a 6 foot, and that would be 3 feet over the allowed 3 feet that could be put into that. If this had been on if this had been the narrower side, they would have actually been okay because they would have been more than 50 feet back from 38th Place. So there is on that provision on corner lots where fences can go into the other side. And this is the side of their house, but it's actually doesn't get covered under that provision. So, staff is empathetic to that. We are also empathetic to preserving these few sheds for the neighboring property owners. Now, when you look at this property, I think this is probably the most important at this point. There's already some landscaping that's kind of very opaque within there. The neighbor also has landscaping that's opaque in nature. I mean, evergreen trees don't last forever, but they stick around for a long time. This probably is the best photo to show what's already there that's flush with the house, so it would come out. I don't know if you put the flags there to kind of show where that would project to. And I've had a discussion with the appellant as well, so I kind of have an understanding of their intentions and what the issues are. One of the things I think from staff's perspective is we can't support the variance criteria here, but certainly there's some practical elements to the situation with the corner lot and the orientation of the house and what's really to the owner, the side rear yard versus what we're calling a front yard, and issues with maintaining privacy of an area, and even I think some drainage concerns in lieu of a year ago that occurred in this area. So one of the things, staff's probably looking at this like Solomon, and the exception criteria could be demonstrated as a practical difficulty. One of the ways to accomplish this would drop the fence height to a 4.5 foot opaque fence and be within the exception. They are able to taper that from so that it's not just this harsh drop from 6 to 4.5 feet. They can taper that to make it look more aesthetic. I think they can probably accomplish their intentions with a 4.5 as well. There may be some options to bring up the level of the grade there too to achieve their intent as well. I know they have to be careful about putting drainage or anything on their neighbor, but I think there's some ways to get that to meet their intent and still fall within the exception criteria. So staff is recommending approval of the exception. We do want to make sure it's in compliance with a fence permit and that the exterior finish is towards the neighboring properties and the street sides in accordance with the ordinance. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to ask. There was a lot of response from neighbors.
Eric, can you put the previous picture up?
The previous picture?
Yeah, it shows the neighbors.
This one little.
Yeah, so the neighbor looks like yeah, that one right there. So he's already got a berm, it looks like, with a
Yeah,
pine
so
tree
there's a little bit of a, kind of a swale down there towards his back patio area.
Okay, thanks.
And how high is the fence that we're seeing? Is that
I think
6
that's a
foot?
6-footer, but I'll let him verify that. But
We're going to put up the consent map. Thanks.
It all support. One card came back with no address, so we don't know where it came from. That spoke
yeah,
against
so we
it.
don't generally mark those, but they're still filed for the record, so
Right.
it's up to you to
I would,
determine what ambivalence means in that case.
I would think the neighbor of most concern to send in a comment card would be the one directly to the east, but I don't see that they've provided any comment. And that certainly wouldn't be connected to the one that was negative, would it? Was there not a name on that one that was opposed?
I don't think that
No
there
name,
was.
there's no address, there's nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So we can only reward anonymity to some levels.
Yeah. Yeah, which is we can't attach it to where it came from. We don't know.
Right.
Okay. All right, anything else for Eric? All right, thank you, sir. All right, applicant. But you're the only one left, it's got to be you. Thank you for your patience in waiting today.
No problem. John Fleming, 4913 38th Place. Yeah, I think I can add some context here, if you don't mind, although maybe hard to see. I suffer from MS, and so moving around this property is a big deal for me, and trying to make sure I try to help and support my wife when she does these things. And water's a big deal here. What's not shown here, and I've got some pictures of it, is some pretty interesting slopage that, let's see if I can,
Just set it on top of this one that's on the screen.
yeah, I want to start here if you don't mind. So when we get to showing some of the grading, what ends up happening is water flows down this direction and it flows this direction. And so our little backyard that sits back there, because of that fence and the house, we become an L shape, and we sit, you saw the little bump there, we're 17 inches below our neighbor to the east. And so everything comes down. So whether it's heavy rain from last June or sort of a big shower that came through in May, also again this June, or just a soaking, it ends up hitting back into that backyard and then ultimately becomes an issue where it becomes stagnant. For me, the reason the MS becomes an issue is that fence I'd like to put on a gate so that I don't have to walk all the way around to the south side and then back to the other side. Once my stamina goes, it becomes a quite interesting thing to watch me walk. My wife likes it because she walks. Anyway, I better not say that too much. So anyway, this became one of these little flight of ideas. I want to open a gate. I want to put this out a little bit because if we do have more rain coming in, we've already replaced everything in the basement, already with the water from last June. You can tell that there's something different about the way that the cooling and things work in that house, and I'm just trying to get as much of the water off of there as we can. Over on, speaking of water, over on this side, we've got a bid from Miller Nursery to go in and actually rock out and put in a rock garden, if you will, on that wall, on that area, because we can't get anything to grow there. I love the mature trees, but with the wet ground, it becomes an issue. So if I look up Brinkwood and I'm looking back towards my neighbors, this is the slope that's going. I'm actually standing in the street here. So that's looking to the east. looking to the west or south, down 38, this is the slope that we end up getting from that side. And so that it just all sort of funnels back down into the side. And for fairness, my property, I didn't necessarily have the best thing ever, but I will show this, that as the rain comes off of our own gutter, that ends up dropping into that exact same spot. By the way, I'm hoping that having a beagle in the picture helps out here.
I like labs.
Labs? That would be my neighbor across the street. His big black lab is out there.
I'm just teasing you.
It's okay. But John and Laura, their property as well. This is to the east. I have spoken to them, and unfortunately, I think the reason they probably haven't responded is Laura's had a medical procedure here recently, and I spent about 35 minutes speaking with them about it after your folks from the city recommended I do that, which, by the way, I've really enjoyed working with them. The city itself, explaining the ordinance, explaining what's going on, explaining why they want to do things. But with regards to the water, I've got two areas circled here. One from their upper roof comes in and then flows into their lower roof. Lower roof comes down and points right at our backyard. Now, we could move it, but it still would have some seepage that would come over there. In the front yard, they mentioned the hump, and again, I have this electronically if you want, but that's actually a 17-inch drop that's there. The drop's not as much when we get to the far end, the far south end of our property, but it still is higher, and you start to get that to roll through. A couple more things, if you don't mind here. If we did the 6-foot fence, the line in blue is carrying that same 6-foot fence straight out and then straight down. That's what the impediment would look like. If you're walking on the sidewalk that's in front of our house on 38, I wanted to give you an idea of what, and I think this is a concern that the city may have, is that if you're looking down there, what can I see, what can't I see? For about 2 or 3 feet, you'd be able to see that fence. And so I understand the concern everybody might have. Where the fence sort of ends, the reason I wanted to put this up, if you're standing right in front of it, you really couldn't see this. I mean, this is looking straight down the line, and because of these great big huge pine trees that you had mentioned before, it does become a little bit of an area where people can't see what's going on here. And then one last thing, I want to use your photo if you don't mind. So the flags that were there, some of my neighbors had some trouble understanding exactly where my front yard was, which they weren't alone. I had the same concern. So I put some flags out here just sort of outlining where that 15-foot marker was, plus the sign on the board out there explaining to them what they were seeing and what those request was. And I wanted to put this out here. 15 foot, there's nothing magical about that. I wanted to have a gate that came out beyond the landscaping, which is about 3.5, 4 feet. And I wanted to make sure that the water passed out away from the foundation enough of a fashion that if we can't get this taken care of, maybe there's other ways that, hey, instead of 15 feet, maybe 10 or 11 feet, something like that, where I could get a gate out to that side. The reason I chose 6 foot is that property line is about 80 feet, and it's all 6-foot property. I like the idea of the taper. I think that makes some sense, but I think it also, when you're standing on our back deck and you look over and all of a sudden you see that change in height, it might look a little bit different. It just could potentially look a little bit odd if you're going to sell the home. The 3-foot side, if you come down to this side, the other thing that maybe isn't readily apparent is the ground does continue to slope down this direction. And so what I mean by that is away from the house and towards us. So a 6-foot high fence that's there really starts to drop down a little bit. I mean, it's probably not as protrusive and of a block as what you might have in some other areas. I'd be open. I like to see. I liked where the city said, "Hey, you can go up to 4.5." I could see maybe going up to maybe 5 foot just to maintain some of that privacy, because we still will have it drop down a little bit. I'd be open to that. I'd be open to sort of refiguring that shape to make it work with whatever easements we may end up having to get through. But you know, I'd again be I've communicated to John and Laura that I know that fences you can put up. In the past, they have had to have access to the side of the house, so they've had their maintenance guys drive up our grass, which they did during one of the wet periods, which threw me for a loop, but they needed to get to it. So they drove up there. So I told them, I said, if I build something here, we'll build it in a way that it can come down. We can do this now where the anchors are attached to the concrete, the posts are attached to the anchors, the boards go up, and then if you had to get in, we'll take everything down, get done what you need to get done, and then move back. And I'll be glad to work with the city if they feel like that's appropriate to get this done. So be more than happy to answer any questions anybody has at this point, but just leave it at that.
Questions for Mr. Fleming?
Well, I want to thank you for taking the city's advice and looking to the neighbors. That was an impressive amount of neighbors in support of you, and that does make a big difference, especially to me. Very well thought out arguments, and rather than just saying I want, you gave some very good explanations. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Fleming, the one thing I'm having difficulty following here, and you've explained things very well on one hand, but if I try to understand what the logic of your reason for even building this fence is, you're building the fence to help control water?
Yes.
I've never heard of people building fences to control water movement.
Control water getting into my house. And so...
Are you changing the grade and elevation with dirt work?
No, moving it away from the foundation. So right now, as you see the picture that's up here in front of us, the water comes this direction, and because of the way that that is structured in the whole fencing unit that was there before, you do get the water that comes in and ends up hitting them, and believe it or not, backing up into that area. And I'd like to give it more space that if it happened again, we could do it. This is part one.
Is the area behind your house currently enclosed by the fence? That's what you're talking about?
Correct. And one more thing, I think, to get to your other point, that wouldn't be the end-all, be-all. Sorry, can we see that? Okay. This is the current structure that we have set up. Eventually, phase 2, if you will, the fence gets moved or doesn't get moved, whatever the case is. This will end up being a planter box. So as any water that comes in, we'll have 1.5 feet, 2 feet worth of a planter box in there. And at the bottom of that planter box, we will have some tubing. So any water that comes in, it'll be the French drain and take it away.
Yeah.
Likewise, with coming off of our roof, we'll tie those things back in together and again, get it away.
You have every right to do that now on that portion. So then why are you bumping out into the short front yard then?
Understood. One is an aesthetic from my standpoint. I could put a gate, to get access to that side. I could put a gate on that fence.
But you could put a gate on your fence right now.
That's what I mean. Yes, I could put a gate on that fence right now. Having that really long front, I sort of like to have that when we walk by the side. I didn't necessarily want to put a gate there. I'd rather have an opening towards our front yard as opposed to what I consider our front yard instead of our side yard. That's just an aesthetic item. Yeah, we could do that. Okay. I think there's other remedies that we could possibly do. But this was one of these things I just wanted to do because it's only 15, 20 feet worth of a backyard. And so just opening it up a little bit, allowing us to get over to that side is the direction we wanted to go.
Okay, I got you. But you're not planning on excavating or changing the land contours the way they are now on the property? Just working with them?
No, the boss at my house will not let me do that.
Okay.
That will not happen.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll see, just for the record, is there anybody here in support? Seeing none. Anybody here in opposition? Seeing none. Anybody questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation.
Well, I would like to see us allow him to go up to 6 feet tall. He's mentioned that there's some ideas brought up today that he hadn't thought about before about maybe going 4.5 feet or grading it. With the trees that the neighbors have planted, I don't think going out the extra 6 feet is going to cause a problem with sight lines in the neighborhood. I don't think it's going to cause a problem with driving. just from looking at how big the yards are. But I would like to maybe see, put a little bit of flexibility into an approval to do that.
Any other thoughts?
Just don't understand what good the fence is gonna do.
I think this might give another line to run against, you know, how it kind of hits the fence and then just kind of stops. I think it gives a little bit more room to run over. And, you know, if it doesn't do what he wants it to do, I mean, this is his thought. We don't have to say it's good or bad idea.
It's gonna give him a little more room in his backyard. And I'm gonna take exception to that being the front yard. That doesn't look like a front yard. That fence isn't gonna bother anything to move it out based on the size of the tree, the berm that's there, the landscaping he's already got there. I don't think that that's gonna cause any kind of a issue from my perspective.
I like the idea that by bumping it out to give him the access through the front, which he considers his front yard, I consider his front yard. Even the post office considers this front yard because that's the address. So it would better match, you know, and maybe be a little better security wise. But, you know, as far as the fence stopping water, yeah, it's probably not going to stop water, but it could help. I mean, he's right at the bottom of the hill where he's getting slammed. And that June rain, if you lived in this area or my area, you got slammed. And if you were in a little bit of a downward spike there, and the difference is 17 feet. So if we're saying he can have 4.5 feet, if you add 17 inches to that, it comes to 71 feet, which is 1 inch less than 72 feet. And he's saying he would even go with 5 feet. So I think there's some we could work with this.
Okay.
And I understand it's a variance, and I think he's proven hardship.
Concern I would have in this case is we've talked a lot about the aesthetics and how it would look, and you know, but we're not changing the grade of the land. And the photo was very telling. You see the slope of the land because of the existing 6-foot fence, which is legal. But if we now bump that out another 15 or however many feet forward, we're now calling more attention to the slope of the land because now we've got a 6-foot fence doing this slope down, and we're drawing attention further to that elevation change by going, hey, look, here is this big elevation change with the fence. Right now it's set back enough, plus he's got his landscaping to help minimize that.
That's not going to change with the way it rainfalls by, hey, look at all the tension. I mean, it's
No,
going to be visual,
right.
but you know.
What I'm saying, to me, it just visually accentuates or exacerbates the grade change visually and draws more attention to it.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be some plantings nearby, just looking at the neighborhood. I'm going to make a motion
Sure, go ahead.
that we allow his variance to go up to the maximum of 3 feet over. So he can go up to 6 feet, but if he wants to vary it, he wants to go 5 feet, he can do that. And I think that's all I need to say.
Okay,
I'll second Lynn's motion.
okay. Is that clear enough for the record? Okay, all right, so we've got a motion by Lynn, second by Cindy. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? Okay, 3. So 3 and 3, it always takes 4 to get a motion to pass. So the motion fails. Okay.
I'll make another motion. I don't think he met the variance test. I agree with staff that the exception, I mean, I think he's made his case for an exception level request. I don't know if he'll want to do the 4.5-foot fence, but I think we should give him that option if he does. So I'd move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, all right. So we've got a motion and a second for the staff recommendation now. All those in favor of that, raise your right hand and say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, all right. And I'm just going to say no again, but it carries. So motion carries at the exception level. So you can go 4.5 feet tall and still have an opaque fence. So, okay. Other business that we have here at Zoning Board of Adjustment, we've got to approve minutes from last month. Anybody who was here last month can make a motion for any changes or approval.
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nate, or I'll give that one to Nathan. He was quick on the draw. So we got a motion by Marlis, second by Nathan to approve minutes. All those in favor that was here last month, raise your right hand and say aye.
I wasn't here.
Okay, so that carries 5-0, and yeah, Cindy's not voting, so motion carries unanimous. Okay, this hearing is adjourned. Okay, takes care of that.